access down there. When they built the self-help down there, they had to create that access for them, and it is for emergency traffic.
Okay.
That could be a place, and that would only be if a train was stalled and wasn't moving for whatever reason. They have kind of a little policy where they stop before or past, they go past 14th Street or they stop before 11th Street. They don't want to block them both.
Right.
So the railroad's very good about that, but you can never say never. We get an oil train through here and it breaks a wheel, and it's gonna be blocked the whole way, but hopefully, we get around it. But that's a valid point. When the numbers start getting higher, that is a cutoff point between both sides, so it would be to our advantage to have something on the other side. You're divided by a river with one bridge, a railroad track with 2 crossings, and then we have a freeway running down this side of town.
Yes.
And so you kind of have 3 sections of town, so.
You got another crossing out at Gallo, too.
Where at?
Gallo.
Oh, that's true, yeah, you have to, yeah, that's right. Court side way down yonder. Kelly's gonna pave that for us.
But if it's raining, you can't do that.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, so here's just a couple looks at things. Again, these are averages. This just gives us an idea of how the district's gonna perform in growth. But in 2011, there were 220, this is money side of things now. So it showed me that there was $220,200 revenue by the county. In 2020, said 447,791. That's not all the revenue. That was the tax-based revenue. The other revenues come from other sources. But I'm just trying to get the tax base because it gives you the overall look. It was a 49.1% increase over the 10 years. It's a 4.9 annual increase. That's in the tax base growth in the district. And if you remember, our annual growth was 4.2 emergency responses in the past 10 years. So we're having a 4.2% increase in calls as well. So in 2011, we had 195 calls, and I just divided the tax base by the 220,200. So each call, based on the tax base and the calls we're running, nothing else, is about $1,129 per call. So today, on 2021, with a 447,791, divide that by the 331 calls that we ran, our per call is 1,352.84, a slight increase, but that again doesn't encompass all the income, and it just gives you an idea based on taxes, based on call numbers, where it's at, how much it's costing us.
That number may be a little bit high because the new growth that we're looking at
Yeah.
are in the other tax rate areas where the fire gets significantly less percentage of the property tax
Right.
base. You're looking at, like where the downtown, where Jacktown
Right.
was, we got about 13%, and in these new areas where the airport is, we're getting only 9%.
Right.
So we're probably looking at maybe 4% less than that, but that's still.
Right, and the performance kind of, it's just
Right.
simply divide it, and it gives you what the overall growth was, and it gives you percentage divided by 10 years, and then by the number of calls you run. Now, I anticipate our call numbers are gonna go up, and on the bottom one, based on a 4% growth by 2031, our numbers would be 667,556.38. And there's other revenue, so I see us being close to probably $1 million. But divide that by 463 calls, which that number was just based on average, not necessarily, what it would exactly be. But if the trend stays consistent like it did for the last 10 years, and both of those are pretty close, the average call would be 1442. And where that gets important is when we start talking about staffing, and the cost of that is extremely expensive because it's an ongoing thing, and once you start it in the full-time realm, it's permanent, it doesn't go back down. Unless we do something like Safer Grant, which is a specific period of time with a certain amount of money, and when it goes away, the position goes away, and that's an understanding when you hire somebody. Plus, when you talk about doing duty coverage, or when you talk about having seasonals and things like that, and we do our budget, we'll be able to forecast exactly how much. When we look at our calls, our numbers, and the percentage, where those calls land, May to October we run more calls in those months, and then that's where we would wanna focus that money to cover those periods of time. And then we got the data for the daytime coverage, you know, and that kind of thing. So that plays a very big role in all of that, and I just wanted to give you that so you kind of had an idea where it breaks down as far as overall on the per call basis.
The Safer Grant, isn't that what the Five Cities Fire was using?
They did,
And
and
that,
they had 4 people for 2 years and then they lost them, but I think they've reestablished it again,
okay,
so they're actually hiring again.
okay.
So Rob, I'm not real clear on why or what it means when you're saying the averages is 1,029, 129 calls.
before they merged.
For what?
What-
For the providing the call, for the paying the,
No, it's just, we run the calls that we get throughout the year. So we're gonna run so many of those calls.
Right.
Our reason for being here is to respond to all risk emergencies. So regardless of what comes in, we're required to respond. So,
so you're saying all that comes in is 220,000 and,
oh, no, that 220,000 was back in 2011.
right?
The tax money that came in for just taxes, that's what the county gave us to function,
Right.
to run 195 calls that year.
Which
So,
gave you the 1,129
129.
to spend on each call essentially.
well, to run those calls, it's costing this district, that's what the county said, you need to run those calls. That's how many calls we had. So it gives you an idea where the base is. It's not actually a 1,029 per call, because a structure fire is gonna cost a lot of money.
Exactly.
A little medical aid is just one person. But when you add it all together and divide it by the overall number, you still have to be here. If that number is 0 or just 1, and they still send us $220,000, well, it costs us $220,000 to run that call. Because regardless if we're running calls or not, to exist, we have to be here and be at the ready, no matter what, 24/7.
Okay.
Whether they use us or they don't use us. But we're here for that purpose, and the purpose is that 195 calls. So I just took that number and said, okay, well, that's what they're getting for their money. And if you look at it over time, to find out in 10 years, based on the percentage, we could kind of forecast of our growth. If it's falling below the 667 in 10 years, we know that our tax base isn't keeping up with our call volume. If our call volume goes up, then it's gonna divide that number and it's gonna cost less to run per call, basically. But it doesn't mean it's cheaper, it means we're doing more. We'll be able to tell if our tax base is enough to sustain what we're doing. And if we have to look at trying to do it differently, like Templeton petitioned and did a rate increase or asked for a percentage from everybody for their fire. So probably in that time frame, honestly, 8 to 10 years from now, that's what's gonna happen here. Right now, we don't have revenue from sales tax. We don't have tourist, what do they call that? Transit?
Transient tax.
Transient occupancy tax.
Yeah, we don't have those things here. So I would imagine in 8 to 10, the way things are going, we will. And that'll be the time that we definitely try to tap into that. But it lets us know if we're, based on our call volume, if it's gonna justify it or not. If we actually added 400 homes, 38 homes, 12 homes, is there other space up there that could be developed?
There's, pretty much everything has
Yeah,
a project spoken for.
Cemetery Road wanted a whole slew of things. So those plans alone, if you look at the population, almost double the size of San Miguel population-wise. So if that happens, you know the business corridor is gonna develop because people are gonna want fast food, grocery store, they're gonna want all those other things that come with that, so.
Massage parlor.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's see here.
Elkhorn can't handle them all, we're gonna need another bar. So, but, you know, that's forecasting the potential growth. So, the master plan needs to to encompass those things and kind of consider it. If not, we've been here 20 years and CSD's still in the fire station that wasn't designed 20 years later, so we need to move away from that idea model and move forward. Budget based on operational needs for the fiscal year 21. So revenue in 2020 was 447,791. Expenses 342, 486.89. January fund balance at the end of last year, so this is mid-year, capital reserves had 272,222.84. Operational reserve was at 256,994.44. Operational was 166,897.41. Grant 15,000. So we were somewhere in the ballpark of there. So what we did when we looked at the budget last year, and one thing I was very frustrated about, and still am, is when I went back and looked at all the reports, the audits, and all the board reports and stuff, to me, I don't see it unfeasible. Why? If you ask me the question, how much money to the penny did you, from point A to point B, bring in for fire? I should be able to give you that number. Then you say, how much did you spend of that? I should be able to give you that number. How much was left, right? That is not too much to ask, but it's a very difficult number to pin down. And we've been through several different ways of accounting, and so that was what was in the bank. That's the account asset. No, that's the bank account number as of January. When we were budgeting, one of the problems for the fire department was we would do a budget based on a projection, but that projection was so wide, it's like, well, are we gonna get this money or are we not? And one of the big problems was, yeah, we're gonna get it, but the budget year starts in July and it ends in June, and none of your money comes in till May or June that you're working off for that year. So all year long, they're like, well, you got no money, you got no money, you got no money. And that right there just drove me nuts. And I didn't really know how to get in there and tear it apart to look at it. Well, since 2017, we did. And we had enough money saved up, and we changed the way we kind of did our accounts. We have an operational account. That's the money that's budgeted for the year, and it goes in at the beginning of July. So in other words, now, this year, we went into the rest of the money and we said, our budget's X dollars. We're gonna take that number and put it in the operational account. Everything that comes in for the rest of that year that we used to forecast and live off of, that's going into the operational reserve. And that will be for next year's budget. Okay, so some other monies go in there, but the focus for the operational account, in other words, that's why we said, when Scott and I sat down and looked at work detail, duty coverage, maintenance repair, all those things, those numbers were funded in that budget at the beginning of the year, and the cash was put in the operational account, done. Now, if something happens that's unplanned, is when we have to come to you, the board, and say, okay, here's our budget, here's what we planned it for, and this is what happened. We need to request a reserve, either capital reserve for facilities or equipment, operational reserve for a function of personnel or operation. We need to make an adjustment to that budget. I don't take that lightly. I think that should be something that requires conversation, resolution before it's moved, and then it's moved. So there's accountability. The capital reserve is all the funds that come in that have restrictions. The operational reserve is your operational tax-based money and other funds that come in that were not part of the budget, and they go into operational reserve, and it builds. And I can tell you at the January, that operational reserve's at 256,997, and Scott can probably look it up, or Tam can real quick and tell you what it is today, but it's like over almost 500,000. I think Scott made the comment that we almost have enough money in there to fund next year's budget over, and still have some left in there. So we're doing really good, and we're still waiting on $100 and something thousand reimbursement from OAS. And that will go in there as well, part of it will. So anyways, as we function and accountability, that's why it was set up this way. In January, there was 698,000. and now we're over 800, it's more like 850, I think. So this right here gives you a 6-year run. It'll just tell you that the pink was what was budgeted each year, and the actual is what was spent each year. I think that slide, and that is a report that Scott pulled up from Black Mountain based on the performance of Fund 20. And it tells a big story. I don't know if I have to say it, but we started in 2017. So I think we've been very mindful of our actual spending versus our budget. And I think as we move forward, that it's gonna even get better. In 2019, that purchase of the engine was, the number accounting for it was partially in there. So we showed some expenses in there that exceeded, but it'll correct itself when we get our payments. So is there any questions? Or let's see. Oh, we get property tax, ambulance reimbursement, public facility fees, grants, plan check fees, OES reimbursement. Those are all forms of revenue for us. Main one being property tax, and depending on the development around here would dictate the rest of the other ones. And you know, we're going to be pursuing more of the grant funding.
I would also, when looking at these projects, looking at how much revenue that we're going to need to cover expenses, if the town continues to keep growing, we should probably look at our public facility fees, at least in this, at some point in the next 10 years, and figure out a strategy for that.
Oh, absolutely. And that definitely would fall into the master plan under facilities,
Mhm.
and then, and what it's being used for, how often,
Right.
what the potential is to generate revenue, things like that.
But I just want to, I think it should definitely be in that plan, so we can then,
Am I at, is that 58?
yeah, it is.
Oh my God. All right, we're almost done. Okay, expenses, planned budget, unplanned, and capital layout. Planned budget, again, I'm funding the Fund 20. At the time you guys approve the budget, then a number from operational reserve is transferred over and the balance is corrected to match what you approved in the budget so that it is funded. And we try to keep from putting anything in there and only taking out what we spend. And if we exceed what the budget line item is, requires your acknowledgement, resolution, and a plan to correct whatever that issue is. And I don't see how we could be over budget or spend monies that aren't identified doing it that way. Unplanned expenses, obviously, equipment failure, building failure, something happens that's outside of the budget plan and the operation plan. Capital layout projects, we're gonna have a few of those, and that will come from the capital reserves and grant funding, and it may have some budget items if the cost is foreseen and able to be planned out. Capital reserve, restricted funds, the facility maintenance and replacement cannot be used on personnel except for OES reimbursement. So when it comes in, essentially when they drive out the door and they get an order request number, they're not working for OES at a rate per person on that engine that is contracted and agreed upon. So I have to sign a thing at the beginning of the year. Geez, it just flipped my mind. What's it called, Scott?
It's our mutual
Survey,
agreement.
the salary survey. And I have to sign it and they send it, so when they go out, when they come in, and let's say they were gone and they made a lot of money, they were gone, they're, I owe me each $20,000, and I go, you know what, I'm just gonna, here's $10,000. I'm just gonna, when that check comes in, I'll wash it and use it somewhere else. If we get audited, 1, you gotta pay it back. 2, you get restricted from participating with OES for 3 years the first time, expelled the second time. So there's no messing around because there's been too many lawsuits where big departments just paid their guys whatever, and then they got their salary rate and it was different, they didn't get paid. But it's no big deal because it's not our money and they did the work and they're working for them. So pay up, we get reimbursed, we're fine with it. And so those funds are spoken for. But the other part of it, it goes into capital reserve and they have specific things that you can spend it on. You can't be frivolous with it, you can't go higher, you can't have a big party, you can't do certain things. It's for equipment and support of the department equipment. Scott, did you have something to add to that one? Balance from previous budget year, the great thing about it is if we keep under the budgeted cap, we don't spend all our money, that money's there, it gets incorporated into the next budget year. So your reserve that you end this year with will stay there, and then you just have to fill the balance of the new budget. And therefore, your budget reserve stays healthy and continues to grow. So if you had a $400,000 budget and you spent $300,000 of it, you're starting off your new year, you got $1,000 in there, and you just bring over the other $3 and keep on rolling. Revenues received during the fiscal year go into that operational reserve. Then we have grants. We've been fortunate to have the RFD grant, Rural Firefighter Department grant, and we've also got a California Fire Foundation grant, which helped us out with our fuel management this year. So do we have any questions on financials? So all of this thing put together, when we looked at everything, look at there, did I do it? Oh, 2 minutes over, darn. Sorry, Ashley, I left no room for discussion.
Not bad.
So, but I gave you a
No more
discussion.
comment.
Okay, so real quick, I know this isn't the master plan. I wanted to set it up so you guys understood our functions, what we do, so that you guys had an idea of why, and what we're asking for. Also, what's kind of coming down the pike, what we see in the future as needs for the fire department. The personnel growth, we're doing really good in equipment. Right now, our focus needs to be on facilities and personnel, the coverage, so we have the response. And as that grow, adapt to them. The training, we're sitting really good on. Recruitment's always going on. On the financials, keeping very close track of our money and where it's being spent, what is being committed to. I think the model we're doing right now is a great way to track it without having any nefarious transfers or something that doesn't line up or make sense. It's accountability. As far as it goes on the district side of things, and the one thing is all transactions require 2 participants. So if there's a transaction or a keystroke on the computer, 2 people witness it and 2 people sign it, and everything's copied. And that's proven to really improve things quite a bit. So as far as the master plan goes, this needs more detail. I think in each thing, like facilities, will require more discussion, especially when it comes time after the temporary housing unit's done. The standalone app, there's not a whole lot there because it's going to be fairly straightforward. But when it comes time to design, plan, and make this place meet the needs 5 to 10 years out, will require a strong discussion. And we can get other support from the county, maybe from San Luis Ambulance, maybe from, using our facilities for more than just that. Public access, that it would work, so.
Is there any state or federal grant funding that might be utilized for?
Firescope has grants, CSDA has grants, and there are other grants. One thing Scott and I have talked about is potentially maybe finding a strong grant writer, somebody that knows about grants. We do some research and find it, not turn someone loose to go look for grants. We did that once, it didn't work out too well. But kind of have some key focuses, and I'm looking for input too. If you guys know grant writers or somebody that knows their way around that arena, you can do really well, especially right now. I was telling Director Sangster, and I was a little disappointed, Tom Mornaro's office called. Real great guy, right? So he calls here and says, call us with any plans you got to go right now. I need it by 4 o'clock.
That was Salute Carbajal.
Salute Carbajal. Are you kidding? By 4 o'clock? But he gets to go away. I called everybody and asked them, but my buddy over here you go. Here's your millions of dollars. Really disappointed. I was not very happy with that attack that they did. But there's more money. They're right now, it's all about supporting public facilities, public entities and things like that. I think we need to look really hard because there is money there.
Money and equipment, and for all we could, find aircraft we could
Absolutely.
utilize, I mean.
Cruise ship, they're giving them things away right now.
Helicopters.
So if there was a natural disaster or that would not be, or I'm thinking of something like, not necessarily natural disaster, well, like a train derailment, you mentioned that earlier.
Yeah.
That's not a drain on this department per se because it's a county,
No, if it's in our district, it's ours. But there's a
but,
thing called Master Mutual Aid Plan. We're designed here to handle your all risk, but initial response. So initial response is the same as Paso Robles, county fire out in the rural area. They're actually far leaner than we are. When it comes to like out on San Marcos Road or out on Hog Canyon or up Indian Valley, you know, they're getting a long response time from just one or two resources. Indian Valley, for some reason, yeah, they're getting maybe an engine out of Bradley during the summer. Sometimes they send someone from, we're like, why?
King City.
King City. So, yeah, it's not very feasible. But in the event of a train accident, we would respond out there and go, wow, I got a train accident. I call ECC, okay, I got a train derailed, multiple cars, hazard placards, I got smoke showing, multiple victims, I'm declaring a MCI, I'm declaring a hazmat, I'm requesting the world. And they'll go, oh, he wants a hazmat call, MCI, and the world, and we're gonna get everything. Last Sunday, I was on the Walmart fire in Roy Grandy. So I'm sitting there at the station thinking, oh, Sunday, I don't have to do nothing, and my tones are going off, I'm like, what in the world's going on? It sounds terrible. And here's Santa Maria responding, and then my tones go off. And I still don't know what it is, and I get on Pulse Point and I go, structure fire, second alarm, Walmart. Well, second alarm means it's a working active fire. And we load up, head down there, make the corner at Spyglass, looking south and see a black column of smoke. Walmart's burning. Got down there, sure enough, the whole back side of it had 3 semi-trucks unload, a bunch of toys, camping gear and everything, had it all stacked to be sorted. And somehow something in there got caught on fire and it burned everything. But it was outside.
oh,
So,
outside.
yeah.
Oh,
He
gosh.
still evacuated Walmart. and did everything.
Still, yeah.
Yeah, that was a pretty impressive call, it's kind of cool. And the aspect of operations and response
Yeah.
and dealing with the situation, 5 cities in that area did a phenomenal job. So there was nothing bad to say about that. They handled it, they got it out, and nobody got hurt, everybody got evacuated, and
My point is that short of, you know, like you're saying, the engines, our equipment or our facility, is there anything that would put a strain on this department?
Well, if our call volume goes up, it's our response. One area that we've really focused on and done good is we can handle structure, fire, stuff like that with our Type 1 that was replaced in 2010. Our Wildland engine we purchased last year, which meets all the state criteria, our criteria. Our patrol helps us out because it's smaller, agile, everybody can operate it, and it's good for quick attack. We run most of our medical aids with it. Again, we've talked about a water tender. We have a need here because of people that live in the areas that are further than 500 feet away. It would be nice to be able to lower that OES or ISO standard so that they would get a better rate in their insurance and things like that. And it's a tool for us to use in the community, and it can generate revenue if it's used on your mutual aid operation. So that right there, and then anytime something happens, we have that master mutual aid plan to have other resources come and back us up. So in that regard, yeah, we're doing really good. We're looking immediately, like the staffing is something, and facilities are the 2 big things that need to be addressed. And then when you talk about if you're gonna do something, 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, if we're gonna do it, you gotta spend the money now. And so why spend the money now on something that only fixes now, when you're gonna have to redo it
Oh, yeah,
and
no.
spend it again? And that's what the master plan is, and encompass it in the master plan.
Yes.
All of this is information to give you guys an idea where that would be. It's not the master plan, but the master plan will be putting these things in line, like establishing the staffing, establishing the equipment standard, establishing the response, and setting the facility needs, and then putting a price tag to it, putting a date to accomplish it, and play them out that way. And I look for your guys' input, your comments, your support, positive, negative, it needs to all be said so that when we finish the plan, that we've, dot all our i's, crossed all our t's, and that we're not leaving something to the wayside. I mean, it'd be great to have this Taj Mahal with all this fancy equipment, and then me and Scott standing out here going, this is great. Who's gonna work all this stuff? Or, we don't do nothing at all, and we allow the town to build up around us, and we don't change anything, and now we're running calls out of here, we can't get volunteers, and now we're not meeting our obligations to the community, because they did pay those taxes, and then someone comes in and says they wanna take it over, and then they provide less service.
Have you had a master plan before?
Not here in that regard, no.
Okay, so this is new for us.
We did one time.
Yeah,
They've had a master plan here in the CSD.
Oh, yeah.
yeah, I mean,
But not in recent.
Mr. Calvin put it eloquently the other night when he said, master plans sometimes can be great ideas that go to a place to die.
Yeah.
And that's what he doesn't want to happen. I agree with him.
Right.
When we put together a plan, if you reach too high, then if you fall short and then you don't try, or you get discouraged, or it's something that can't come to an agreement on. And that's why I wanted to give you guys this information. I don't know if you guys understood a lot of what our responsibilities are and what we actually focus our attention on, and which one requires the attention and when it requires it. The things that, I always like to tell everybody in classes I teach, tell me one thing a fireman can't do. Remember, they're a jack of all trades, master of none, right? There's one thing a fireman can't do. Quit. Can't quit. There's no off switch on this place. So it always has to be 24/7. So the thing I get to live with is, like when I'm at work and down in San Luis or something, is that we get that medical call and someone's 2-year-old child's choking, and I hear the tones go out and I don't hear a response. I don't hear a response. I don't hear a response. Yeah, I know the county's gonna send additional, but I really don't want that other department coming in and taking care of my responsibility. And I really don't wanna do it when I have to look at that mom in the eyes when her daughter passes or her son passes away. So those are kind of things that we have to live with. House catches on fire and they're down here at the street saying, oh, it took forever for somebody to get there. Well, it does if you're there from the time the call starts. Just dial 911. It takes forever, and then it speeds up real quick at the end. But it takes time, and so that's the things that we have to focus with. And that's why staffing is important, to keep those 3.3 responders coming, to keep that call number time down, to look at the time of day when the calls are happening and adjust our budget and pay for somebody to cover those spots that are kind of in danger, and then have the equipment to get the job done.
I think it's actually fairly important to compartmentalize, like,
Yeah.
have a master plan for fire, master plan
Absolutely.
for utilities, master plan for district offices, whatever. Because if you look at it as it's all under one umbrella, trying to